At least 16 million people are at risk of severe weather, including in Missouri and Arkansas, where strong tornadoes are possible. This severe series of storms have already left hundreds of thousands of residents without power. Neighborhoods have been flattened by 90-mile-an-hour straight-line winds, and tornadoes have touched down in Texas. Many areas, including Mississippi and Tennessee, are at risk tonight with the continuing threat of tornadoes, powerful winds, severe thunderstorms, and massive hail.
The last abortion clinic operating in Kentucky has sued a state health and family services agency, accusing it of retaliating against the clinic for another lawsuit and trying to use a technicality to shut the facility down. The lawsuit, filed in U.S. District Court in Louisville Wednesday by the EMW Women's Surgical Center, seeks an emergency restraining order that would block the State Cabinet for Health and Family Services from revoking its license. According to the lawsuit, the state agency sent the clinic a letter out of the blue on March 13th, claiming its license renewal was in jeopardy because certain agreements with ambulance companies were out of compliance.
CBS has reported that plans for updated sex education curriculum at a South Bay school district had parents protesting at a local board meeting Tuesday night. CBS San Francisco reports that Cupertino Union School District board members voted 2-2 on the changes, which needed a majority to pass. The issue for many parents was the graphic nature of the material and how far is too far when it comes to sex ed in middle school. The proposed curriculum included descriptions of vaginal, oral, and anal sex, along with material on homosexuality.
Social media feeds are overflowing with selfies. Tens of millions are taken every day, so it's only natural that some should burst into the art world. From celebrities to world leaders, they're all here at the Saatchi Gallery in London. No one, it seems, is too grand to be snapped on a smartphone. But can these instant images be compared to the self-portraits of the old masters and their followers? Rembrandt loved to paint himself, Van Gogh too, and their work is on display here, on screens that is. The gallery's director believes both can be art.
If you're going to ask me a question like, can a selfie be art, I would say probably anything can be art if it's followed through with enough conviction and people embrace that as being art as a result.
For artist Juno Calypso, who photographs herself as a character looking ultra-feminine but exhausted by all the effort it takes, the smartphone is breaking down barriers.
The art world and photography itself is quite elitist. It's always been male-dominated, and so it's so nice now that young people and women and everyone, like people that weren't visible before, can become visible. But then I know what the art world is like. I know that even photography is still a bit of an embarrassing cousin to the art world, and so photography has just been let in, so I feel like selfies are like at the back.
This room is dedicated to artists who've studied and trained, and when given a phone, this is what they captured. Compare it to these pictures, some of the thousands sent in by the public. The smartphone is certainly breaking down technical barriers, but what connects these images is they're driven by ideas, not vanity.
With this kind of technology, almost anyone can take an artistic picture, but the art world is an industry like any other, and it's hard to see how a selfie could be valuable once it's been reproduced on the internet. What this exhibition does do, though, is celebrate the snaps that tell us something about the world that we live in. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera, London.
According to a study released on Thursday, U.S. pedestrian deaths rose sharply for the second year in a row in 2016. Experts say this trend mirrors increased drivers' cell phone use and distracted driving. An 11% rise in deaths occurred over 2016, making it the largest increase in the 40 years that national records have been kept. This followed a 9.5% increase in 2015. The study's author said the rise is largely attributable to cell phone use. He said while it was statistically difficult to rule out other causes, the coinciding rise in deaths and cell phone use suggests a connection.
The mayor of Irving, Texas, who has expressed belief that Sharia law is putting U.S. laws in jeopardy, has reportedly said she'll leave her position to work in the Trump administration. Beth Van Dooney informed a gathering of 300 people of her plans at a luncheon Thursday. Van Dooney, who was first elected mayor of the Dallas suburb in 2011, gained national prominence in February 2015 after she responded on Facebook to reports that Sharia law was taking hold in parts of Texas. The mayor is part of a growing number of Americans and politicians who believe in an unfounded conspiracy theory that Muslims in America are trying to subvert the U.S. Constitution.
The discovery of a huge dead bull shark in floodwaters near Ayr in Australia, just south of Townsville, is likely to give some residents a reason not to venture into the floodwaters after all. Nearly the whole of northeastern Australia is still reeling from the after effects of Cyclone Debbie, which made landfall with 114-mile-per-hour winds on Tuesday. Localized flooding had attracted many locals until the news of the shark's discovery seemed to ground those plans to a halt.
Court-appointed lawyers for the drug cartel kingpin Joaquin Guzman stated their client is being held without access to sunlight or relatives. Known as El Chapo, Guzman was extradited from Mexico to the United States in January. In a letter dated March 28th, Amnesty International stated the former head of the Sinaloa cartel is restricted to his cell 23 hours a day. According to the letter, the lights in his cell remain on at all times. Public defense attorney Michelle Gellernt added he has also not been allowed to speak with his wife or family members. A recent court filing indicated that his strict confinement puts Guzman at risk for psychological damage.
European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has a serious message for President Trump. CNN reports that Juncker recently stated that if Trump continues to promote Brexit, then he'll promote the independence of Ohio and Austin, Texas, in the United States. Juncker, a Luxembourg politician who has been president of the European Commission since 2014, made his comments while speaking at the conference of the center-right European People's Party. Juncker also stated that the UK's plan to leave the European Union should not be considered the end of everything, but a new beginning.
A former U.S. congressman has been indicted for allegedly stealing charitable donations to foot his personal bills. On March 28th, former Representative Steve Stockman of Texas and his former congressional aide Jason Posey were charged with soliciting more than $1 million under false pretenses to pay for campaigns and personal expenses. The complaint alleges that Stockman siphoned off money meant for charity to, among other things, conduct surveillance on a perceived political opponent. The Justice Department also accuses Stockman and Posey of conspiring to cover up the crimes. Stockman served 2 terms in the House, most recently representing the suburbs around Houston from 2013 to 2015. The 60-year-old was arrested at Bush Intercontinental Airport earlier this month as he attempted to board a flight for the Middle East. According to his attorney, Stockman plans to plead not guilty. For Newsbeat Social from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
CNN has reported that Canadian police think an improvised explosive device blew up Thursday at the same building as the provincial courthouse in Saskatoon. Police and fire officials are at Kilbourne Place, which also houses the Saskatoon Provincial Courthouse and is the scene of the explosion. The Saskatoon Police Service said in a statement, there are reports of some minor damage to the exterior of the building. There are no injuries. An explosives disposal unit is at the scene, as well as a bomb detection canine team, and no arrests have been made.
Reuters reports that a Flint, Michigan pastor has been charged by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission with running a $6.7 million fraud business. The SEC on Thursday said Larry Hawley misled churchgoers, retirees, and laid-off auto workers, hoping for real estate riches by appealing to their faith. A federal judge in Detroit this week froze assets belonging to Hawley, Treasure Enterprise, and Patricia and Wright Gray, a financial consultant for the company. The lawsuit against Hawley seeks to recoup ill-gotten gains and impose civil fines.
Japan is considering expanding the role of its military. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party made the suggestion in a proposal submitted to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The proposal says Japan's missile defenses are insufficient and should be improved. It urges the administration to consider using the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD system, developed by the United States. It also urges development of the capability to strike back at enemy bases in case of an attack. Japan's post-World War II constitution renounced war and the use of force to settle international disputes. However, in 2014, Japan reinterpreted the constitution to allow Japan's self-defense forces to defend allies who come under attack. Former Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera headed the panel that submitted the new plan. He says Japan should have the ability to destroy enemy bases to prevent the launching of additional attacks. CNN reports he emphasized this would not be a preemptive strike. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
The United States Justice Department announced in a court filing Thursday that it would appeal a ruling which blocked President Trump's revised travel ban. The appeal would overturn a ruling from a Hawaii federal judge which granted an injunction that prevented Trump's restrictions on travel from some Muslim-majority countries. The appeal will be considered by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco. Last month, the appeals court upheld the suspension of Trump's order.
The removal of a massive church organ in Rhode Island has uncovered a 170-year-old mystery. Workers were removing the 2,400-pipe organ from St. Mary's Church in Newport for renovation when they discovered mysterious faces in each corner of the choir loft. When speculated if one of the female faces could be the Virgin Mary, Reverend Chris von Maluski told CNN affiliate WPRI, "I doubt very much they would cut the face of Mary in half." WPRI News reported the faces in question were found at the end of a series of arches featuring the faces of Jesus' 12 apostles.
In a bid to end the year-long backlash over transgender rights that has cost the state dearly in business projects, conventions, and basketball tournaments, the compromise plan announced Wednesday night by the Democratic governor and leaders of the Republican-controlled legislature was worked out under mounting pressure from the NCAA, which threatened to take away more sporting events from the basketball-obsessed state as long as the law, also known as House Bill 2, remained on the books. The new measure cleared the House and Senate and was signed by Governor Roy Cooper in a matter of hours. The American Civil Liberties Union and gay and transgender activists complained that the new law still denies them certain protections from discrimination, and they demanded nothing less than full repeal.
Vice President Mike Pence cast a tie-breaking vote in the Senate on Thursday that sets the stage for states to defund Planned Parenthood. Pence's vote could allow Congress to undo a rule President Obama put in place, blocking states from removing family planning funding from centers that offer abortion. Under this rule, states could not single out clinics that provide abortion along with other sexual and reproductive health services and take away funding. Pence's vote clears the way for another vote to return that power to the states.
Police in Italy have foiled a plot to steal the remains of Ferrari founder Enzo Ferrari. Police provided details at a news conference in Nuoro on the island of Sardinia. They say they uncovered the plot during an investigation into arms and drug trafficking. 34 suspects, who are reportedly members of a Sardinian crime organization, were arrested in a large-scale police raid. Investigators suspect the group was planning to steal the casket and remains of Ferrari, then demand ransom money from his family. In addition to founding the iconic car company, Ferrari was also a pioneer of Formula One racing. He died in 1988 at the age of 90. His body rests in an above-ground tomb in the San Cataldo Cemetery in Modena, Italy, near the original Ferrari plant. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
On Thursday, the U.S. Treasury said that a well-known British Islamist preacher who was sentenced to prison last year for inviting support for the Islamic State militancy was added to the U.S. global counterterrorism list. Anjem Choudhury was imprisoned in Britain for 5.5 years for encouraging support for Islamic State. The Treasury said that Choudhury was one of 7 people added to the list, which blocks their assets in the United States and prohibits U.S. citizens from dealing with them. Others added to the list were individuals from several different countries who are suspected of aiding the Islamic State in organizing fatal attacks.
Kitam Ismail is one of the new refugees. With her husband and her children, she traveled to Lebanon from Raqqa in the last few weeks. It wasn't an easy trip. It wasn't an easy decision to leave.
ISIL was recruiting children and somehow brainwashing the children to leave their parents and join their army. And ISIL was also forcing parents to hand in their beautiful daughters. I was afraid they might do that to my children, and so we had to flee the country and leave Raqqa.
Since the start of the year, the countries around Syria have seen a surge in refugee numbers. For Kitam, it meant leaving everything behind as she zigzagged across the country for 10 days, moving from safe place to safe place. She shows me all the family has, and most of this has been borrowed or donated.
I've been married for the past 25 years. Everything I bought and owned is now gone. I had everything in my house in Raqqa, everything you can imagine. Now I have nothing. We barely have blankets to cover ourselves within the freezing nights.
The UNHCR says that the countries that have promised to take in refugees must actually meet their commitments, and other nations need to step up as well. 6 years on, the fighting goes on in Syria, and the refugees continue to come. Kitam says she wants to go back to Syria when the war is over.
I'll surely go back. There's nothing as beautiful as one's country. I'd die for the country that holds all my beautiful memories.
That is echoed by many here. They just don't know what they'll be going back to or when. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Debo refugee camp in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley.
On Thursday, UN human rights investigators have said that 19 U.S. states have introduced bills that would curb freedom of expression and the right to protest. Investigators said this is an alarming and undemocratic trend that has derived ever since Donald Trump's election as president. Concerns for free speech in the U.S. has risen ever since President Trump has branded U.S. media as the enemy of the American people. Lately, there has been a push for stricter laws on expression since those against Trump have pursued persistent public protest against his controversial policies. In a statement, investigators said that the trend also threatens to jeopardize one of the United States' constitutional pillars, free speech.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has met Turkey's leaders during his first visit in his new role. But despite the smiles and warm messages, the meetings were held under the shadow of pending issues from former President Barack Obama's term and continuing today. The biggest challenge is the United States' support for the Syrian Kurdish fighters, many of whom belong to the group known as the YPG.
The U.S. military accepts that there is no distinction between the PKK, which is a terrorist organization, and the YPG. However, the previous administration failed to acknowledge that. This is an unfortunate situation for us. It affects the relationship between our countries and has also affected the way Turkish people view the U.S. as an ally. We have repeatedly expressed that it's a mistake to consider cooperation with a terrorist organization in the guise of the YPG, and in the long term, that would be a mistake in Syria.
Syrian Kurdish fighters are closing in on the city of El Raqqa, ISIL's so-called capital. The operation has strained relations between the United States and Turkey.
What we discussed today were options that are available to us. They are difficult options. Let me be very frank. These are not easy decisions. They're difficult choices that have to be made. But ultimately, Turkey and the United States will stay together in the fight as part of the broader coalition to defeat Daesh.
The U.S. has partnered with Syrian Kurdish fighters on the ground in its campaign against ISIL.
According to reports, Democratic Governor Roy Cooper and GOP leaders in the state of North Carolina have an agreement in place to end the state's controversial bathroom bill. However, the questions now remain on if they will have enough votes in the House and Senate so the replacement measure for House Bill 2 can reach Cooper's desk. Cooper, who ran for governor on a platform that included a complete repeal of the bill, said Wednesday night, "It's not a perfect deal, but it repeals House Bill 2 and begins to repair our reputation." The deal comes amid recent news that HB 2 will cost North Carolina nearly $4 billion in lost business over a dozen years.
Italian police announced that 3 men have been arrested in connection to a plot to blow up a bridge. According to Italian authorities, the 3 men from Kosovo and an unidentified minor were apprehended for plotting to destroy the city's famous Rialto Bridge. A Venice prosecutor stated one of the alleged plotters said bombing the bridge would send them straight to heaven. The wiretapped conversation suggests the plotters were arrested on suspicion of terrorism with jihadist motives. The 4 suspects were detained during a wider police operation that included raids at 12 different locations in Venice. It appears that many are unhappy with President Trump's decision to roll back much of the environment-saving work that President Obama had done. 6 environmental groups this week filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. According to Reuters, in a federal court in Montana, the groups are challenging the president's decision to approve construction of the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. The groups said the State Department, which granted the permit needed for the pipeline to cross the Canada-U.S. border, relied on an outdated and incomplete environmental impact statement.